Hello everyone, welcome to Anime No Me, and thank you for joining us for another One Piece video. The complete leaks of chapter 1062 of One Piece just dropped and have revealed to us some very important and interesting events about this chapter. So in today's video, we're going to talk about everything that happens in this upcoming chapter of One Piece. But before we dive into the video, if you're new to the channel or even if you've watched a bunch of our videos, we'd be absolutely honored if you'd leave us a like or even subscribe and maybe leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of the video. It really helps us out and motivates us to make more content. And if you'd like to help us out in a bigger way, consider sharing this video or your favorite with a friend. But without further ado, let's get into these leaks. So my friends, chapter 1062 is going to be titled Adventure in the Land of Science, and it continues from the same place where the previous chapter left off. Some of the Straw Hats are now looking down a very large robot and a woman claiming to be Vegapunk. Frankie, with a large smile, questions her if she really is Vegapunk, while Zorro retorts that they are being too noisy. But Frankie continues talking to Vegapunk, saying that he has a great respect for him. Usopp notes that this robot was dozens of times bigger than General Frankie, of course referring to Vegapunk's large mecha robot. While Sanji, like we would expect, becomes infatuated with this Vegapunk, saying that she was a very pretty girl. However, it's Nico Robin that kinda stops the conversation, saying that she'd never heard anything about Vegapunk being a woman, adding on that with everything that Vegapunk's done, this young girl couldn't be old enough to have done all of it. Vegapunk then says, well, that's obvious, she was Punk 02, and then tells the Straw Hats to give her all the gold they have, because if they do that, she'll allow them to leave. But Nami says that they don't have any gold. Nami continues by saying that it was Vegapunk who should be handing them money, because if it's to rescue them, it should at least be a decent rescue if they're gonna have to pay for it, and giving them money would allow them to be able to continue their adventure and leave. But Vegapunk gets infuriated, saying that he didn't actually intend to save them. Vegapunk then stops arguing and says that normally ships can't reach this region of the sea, and the conclusion of the sentence is cut off by a drop of water. But everything indicates that Vegapunk at least asked Nami a question, or even posed some rhetorical question to complement his speech. On the next page, we see large robots with animal features surrounding them, and Vegapunk explains that these are the weapons called the Sea Beasts. And the Straw Hats look around them and are very surprised, and especially Frankie, who gets very excited to see, saying that these robots were amazing. But Nami and Brook just can't take it, and they start breaking down and scream and cry with fear, while Zorro is shown with an expression of doubt while he stares at one of these giant robotic sea monsters. But then their conversation is interrupted by a ringing transponder snail that was coming from Vegapunk's pocket, and the voice on the other end of the snail asks what Lilith was doing, assuming that she's drinking again, and then the voice says that she should have a lot more pride as a scientist. So it turns out that this Vegapunk standing in front of the Straw Hats is also called Lilith, and then calls the person on the other end of the snail Shaka, telling them to calm down. Right after that, it seems like she kind of chastises the person on the other end, asking if they can increase their budget because they needed some specific things. Shaka replies to Lilith, saying that these people in front of them are not the type to surrender because they were the Straw Hats, the ones who after all recently became a Yonko crew. But Lilith whispers back into the snail shell, saying that she knew this and they have to have a ton of treasure on their ship. But from the other end of the snail, Shaka tells her, well, if that's the case, Lilith has made a mistake. She shouldn't underestimate the Straw Hats, and soon after tells her to look at the swordsman of the crew. And as Lilith looks at Zorro, she has a look of astonishment on her face. We see Zorro with a not too serious expression, but still ready to draw his sword if Lilith made some kind of wrong move. And Lilith, while still watching Zorro, realizes that he is the Roanoa Zorro, the former pirate hunter, possessing a bounty of 1.111 billion berries. Shaka, from the other side of the snail, goes on to say that the reason why Zorro is so calm is because at that distance, he could take their life instantly. And the same, of course, would go for the demon child known as Nico Robin, who was behind her. Starting to look scared, Lilith asks what could they do against this amount of sea beast robots. And Frankie says something, but the watermark on the leak covers his speech balloon. But we see that he and Sanji are really unconcerned because they are in love with with the robots and are really happy to see Lilith. Lilith starts acting if they were being somehow used as bait, because it was just for an instant that they had let their guard down. But Zorro interrupts the conversation between the two on the snail, calling Lilith a Vegapunk, and says that he has a request for her. Shaka replies that to go ahead, and soon afterwards we see that they ask Lilith to bring the straw hats to them. And we see a panel with Shaka wherever they are, and reveal that on their back is Punk 01. So this appears to be a version of Dr. Vegapunk, but it is Shaka. The chapter then changes to a scene where we see Luffy together with Bonnie, and they're talking. And Luffy asks her if she had been on this island before. And Bonnie answers that when she was a child, she had been there, but there had just been a simple lab back then. Luffy asks her what she came to do to the island this time, and Bonnie says that her father had been turned into a cyborg at the hands of Vegapunk. And when we see her father's face, we see that it is in fact Bartholomew Kuma, a member of the Revolutionary Army and former warlord of the sea. Jinbei looks worried and says that Kuma may have lost all sense of himself as a human by now, and he may not even know who he is. And Bonnie said that he had been turned into something much worse, nothing more than a living tool or weapon. Luffy reacts quite appalled about what had happened to her father, but calls her Bogey, and Bonnie yells at Luffy, correcting their name as they climbed a ladder that led to the island's surface. Chopper celebrates about being on the surface, while Luffy marvels at what he was seeing all around him, and saying that now they're gonna go look for food. Bonnie then tells Luffy that she had met Sabo and Mary Joie, but we don't get to see the rest of the conversation because, like earlier parts of the leaks, this speech bubble is covered by a watermark and we can't see what is written. Luffy, when he sees a huge creature, kind of looks scared, wondering if it was a giant robot or some kind of space monster. We also see a ton of different things flying around, leaving them really surprised at what they were witnessing. But then Luffy gets excited, saying that he was gonna ride a robot. But just as Luffy was about to stretch his arms out and climb up, a large metal creature that was standing still moved and eats Luffy. We next see everyone scared, but Luffy manages to avoid being eaten and then sees some different sweets right by them. So he goes running right towards it, except Jinbei calls out saying it's a trap. But when they reach the food, they pass right through it and wonder how this was possible. They hadn't died, they weren't a ghost or anything, so it could only be a hologram. But this leaves even more questions because this is the first time they've ever seen it. Again, Luffy sees another huge monster, referring to the big robot that appeared in front of them. And while they're talking, Jinbei notices something, that the oceans nearby are frozen, but where they currently stood, it was quite warm. However, before Jinbei could even finish talking, a large woman appears in front of them, saying that this was the southern part of the country. And even though the island was definitely a winter island, they were able to control the temperature of the island itself. Surprised, Luffy punches the girl, but sees that she's really quite resistant, even comparing her durability with Kaido's, but then asks her if she was hollow inside. But Luffy, without getting a response, receives a big punch in return to his face, and the girl is shown angry with Luffy's attitude and is offended by his actions. While in the midst of flying away, Luffy apologizes, but then collides with the machine, and then a hamburger appears right in front of them. And when he sees the food, Luffy and Chopper and Bonnie run towards the machine to eat. The woman says that as long as there are the ingredients, they can serve 500 kinds of meals in 1 minute. Again, we don't see the rest of what she says, but she expresses kinda some bit of annoyance towards what she's seen. She then punches the large creature that had just tried to eat Luffy, but when they realize it's a hologram, it's even stranger because the girl's still able to hit it. When asking her how she managed to hit a hologram, she answers by saying that she did it because of the photon pressure gloves, because the gloves make the hologram recognized as a physical object. The Straw Hats then ask her who she was, so she introduces herself being a robot created by a genius scientist named Vegapunk, so she's also considered a Vegapunk. The woman then reveals herself as Dr. Vegapunk Atlas, Punk 06, but then says that she's often referred to as Violence and gets enraged, saying that it was just a lie. And Luffy and Chopper are just kind of surprised by looking at her. The chapter then changes scene again to the New World, where we see a world government ship and people are being talked to by somebody off panel. and we see that they are talking to none other than Luchi, Kaku, and Stussy. Kaku tells Luchi that Vegapunk was alone and that they're just too much of a genius and too busy, that they never have enough time, and recites a Japanese proverb about a cat, making some bit of symbolism about being busy. He goes on to say that this means that there are 6 people that represent the cats, and they are all Dr. Vegapunk, showing a piece of paper in which we can see 6 silhouettes, and 1 silhouette centered at the top, symbolizing the real Vegapunk. And then we get the names of each of the Vegapunks, being Punk 06, aka Violence, Atlas Call, Punk 05, aka Desired, called Yoa, Punk 04, Knowledge, called Pythagoras, Punk 03, Feelings, called Edison, Punk 02, called Mal, or also Lilith, and Punk 01, Correct, also known as Shaka. Luchi says that these geniuses are going to be a royal pain to confront, and so if they were going to get their hands on Vegapunk, they would have to take this brat to Egghead Island. And we see then a Seraphim Kuma standing behind Rob Lucci. But this only furthers to complement the ominous nature of the scene, where Luchi is saying that they would have to take every life of every Vegapunk, including the original one, and that was their mission. And Luchi also says that the lab is full of precious items, so they needed to be careful as not to end up damaging any of the precious or valuable things. Stussy remarks that it was strange to take the life of one of the most important men in the world, and wonders if this had any connection to what had just happened in Leloucha the other day, referring to, of course, to the extinction of everyone and pretty much everything in that country, making the island just disappear from the map. But Kaku says something to Stussy, referring to his great intuition. However, we don't know what that is said because there's another watermark over the bubble. But this is how we bring an end to our chapter. So there you have it, folks, the full leaks for chapter 1062. And now that we've covered all that, we'd love to know what you think about it. What do you think about these different versions of Vegapunk? And how do you think they kinda got named? Secondly, why would Luchi and the rest of his crew be after Vegapunk? Do you think they're actually acting on the orders of the world government, or perhaps the Marines? Or are they going rogue and just doing it because Rob Lucci has some other goal in mind? And finally, what do you think about this revelation that Jewelry Bonnie's father is none other than Bartholomew Kuma? I mean, there had been a lot of different details kind of talked about in the community that there was some relationship because they'd come from the same island. But what do you think? I mean, this is pretty cool. Let us know what you think in the comments below. So as we bring our leak video to the close for chapter 1062, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching the video all the way up to the very end. Be sure you comment on any themes or ideas that you'd like to see in future videos. And also, since you made it this far, give us a like and hit that red subscribe button before you head out to take on the rest of your day. I hope to see you all in our next video, and let's keep sailing this giant sea together. Take care.